What am I then, boy?
You're a loudmouth schnook.
1, 2, 3, 4. So these records that I found here that I'm about to show are from a new store in town, at least new to me. I don't know how long they've been there or how long they've been doing vinyl, but it's Little Horse Vintage down in Old Town here in Fort Collins, and really recommend the shop. It's so well laid out. It's all mid-century kind of stuff, so it hits close to home for me. And they seem to have a great curated selection of vinyl. Not the most extensive, definitely not. I mean, it's a joke compared to Amoeba in terms of size. But for around here, they really seem to zone in on stuff that's of interest. They don't have, all the what most of us would call junk records there taking up space. And they've got it well organized into sections and so on. The guy there was super helpful. He told me of a couple different places in town that might have records worth looking into, and so I'm going to do that at some point in time. Anyway, first record here I want to talk about today is, we're dealing with that glare stuff. Doug Saum's first solo album, simply titled Doug Saum and Band. And Doug Saum, if you don't know, it goes back to Sir Douglas Quintet. He's kind of a real free spirit type of guy, well loved amongst musicians, even though he isn't a household name. He gets as supporting artists on recordings and stuff. Everybody from Bob Dylan to Dr. John. Really, like I say, quirky. This whole Sir Douglas Quintet thing, the story I've heard is that it was kind of an inside joke. They chose the name, or he chose the name, I don't know which it was, and pretended they were from England, because all of the raves that the Beatles and the Stones and so on got, kind of his own private protest or whatever about European and specifically British bands. As it is, though, they are from San Antonio, Texas, or at least he is, and all his music is kind of Tex-Mex based. And all the albums have kind of a very loose, almost live type of feel to them. Where I like him best is way later in time with a band called the Texas Tornadoes. But you can tell every Doug Saum recording I've ever heard, you can tell it's Doug Saum. And he has a unique style. Flaco Jimenez, who's famous in his own right, is the accordion player on the group. Like I say, it's Tex-Mex music. It's a lot of fun. The recordings are fun because you hear them talking to each other and all this weird stuff going on, so that you almost feel like you're right there in the studio with them. I was really excited to find this album. This was a re-release. It's not a original, and it comes on this gold-colored vinyl, which, at first I was really excited about all the colored vinyl, but now there's so much of it that it doesn't really mean all that much to me. And on this particular album, it's really not that great a pressing. And so if the colored vinyl plays into that at all, which some people say it does, I definitely would prefer black for that reason. Next one I want to talk about is Alan Parsons' project, someone I was really, really into, and to a large extent still am. If you're not familiar with them, Alan Parsons is the engineer primarily responsible for how Dark Side of the Moon, Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, sounds. He's engineer, very young. I think it's like his third project that he gets handed Dark Side of the Moon, and he's credited with a lot of the unique sounds and so on that's part of that album, those are Alan Parsons that comes up with them. If you listen to Alan Parsons' project, it's a little less rock, I guess, than Moody or than Pink Floyd is, but it's still in the same kind of feel. You still get kind of the spaciness of things panning back and forth through your speakers and so on. And this album is kind of funny. It kind of threw me off at first. It's a great album. It's great, well recorded and so on. But it's, unbeknownst to me, has got kind of the closest things maybe to hits that Alan Parsons ever had. And I'm used to Alan Parsons being someone who's a little bit obscure and so on, so it was kind of jarring to go, oh yeah, I even heard that song on the radio. Anyway, I'm glad to have gotten that album, and will be listening to it as part of my regular rotation. Last album I wanted to talk about today is maybe the craziest find, for me anyway. I don't know if you can see that. I almost want to leave it unsaid who that is. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, that is Neil Young, basically doing a rockabilly type album. I had no idea this was out there, and when I saw it, I had to get it. It's crazy. It actually sounds very good. He does a good job with the old rockabilly and early rock and roll type of sound. How it come about is funny. Geffen his record label was feeling sore that his previous record hadn't sold so well. So what he comes back to them with is a country album. What's that called? Old Ways, which I guess gets released eventually. I'm not familiar with it, but he put out what was from critics and as far as buying public and stuff, an album that Geffen wasn't happy with. They really didn't want him to turn into a country player, and so as a protest, he puts out this rockabilly album instead, and they were so mad that they actually cut the recording session off early, and a couple songs that Neil had intended to put on it didn't get there, so it's pretty short as far as an album. You'd almost think it was an EP. But to me, anyway, not having known about it, it was such an oddity. I had to pick it up, and I'm glad I have it. It kind of makes me smile, and Neil Young. Let me talk about him for just a second here. He is, I don't know. I'm not a big Neil Young fan. There are some songs after the Gold Rush as an album I love. But I think where he really deserves credit is as far as constantly trying new things, putting himself out there. He's not someone that you'll catch on the road playing his greatest hits, I don't think, ever. Because he's constantly trying new material and writing new songs and stuff, and I very much appreciate that about him, and would kind of crown him king of still living musicians, just because of that one aspect. Anyway, I think that's about all I've got to say today. We'll see if I can finally get this edited down and out. Hope so. And hopefully I'll come back with something more a whole lot sooner. Bye.